Thank you. All right, is this working? All right, so I see some of you got your phones out. I see some of you doing your homework. I'll tell you what, if 5 minutes into this you're not totally interested, pull them back out. I will not be offended, all right? If you want to call me on that, say this is boring, go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll give you permission to pull out your phones and your laptops and whatever. So you guys in the back up there, is this like a club, like in the very back? There's some seats up here, and so you guys want to come on down. There's 3 right here on the aisle. You have to climb over anybody, and there's 3 over here, and I'm sure these gentlemen will move over, so they'll be really easy to get to. All right, so every couple of years since I've been a kid, I've done a startup. And my first lemonade stand was pretty cool. It had wheels on it, and I rolled it down to the end. It cost me $55. It was made out of plywood, and rolled it down to the end of the street. I lived in the corner of Woodstock and Montecito in Los Alamitos, California. Anybody from Southern Cal? Not as many. Huh, interesting. How many had a lemonade stand growing up? Nice. All right, I'm in the right place. Then urethane skateboard wheels came out, and I made some of the very first urethane skateboard wheels. We went from chalk wheels to this new substance called urethane, and then I started a window washing business. I went to Mexico to visit my grandfather. We worked on his farm all summer. I came back. We did a lawn mowing business. How many have had a lawn mowing business? So they say, when we look for entrepreneurs and we ask people that we're investing into, we actually go back that far. And we say, what did you do when you were a kid? Did you have the lemonade stand? Did you have the lawn mowing business? Yep, I had all of those. The next business, I had a sprinkler construction business, and then I bought a pool maintenance and service company. Anybody do pools growing up on a professional basis? No? Okay, I'm strange. So now the lemonade stand was I was telling my kids about how awesome my lemonade stand was, and my 10-year-old decided to one-up me, and so this was his. So, Lemonade. And it's the Bermuda Triangle, the John Lemon, the Lemonade. Stand up, Neil, take a bow. So in our family, you get to choose. We don't require everything. You get choices in our family. You get to choose which startup you're going to do every summer, and you get to choose which instrument you're going to play. So it's very democratic. And so Neil chose to do the lemonade stand. He came up with that, and it was amazing. He ended up just crushing it. He was making between no less than $60 and what was your amount? Up to like $120 a day? $120 a day. And I said, who's your target customer? And he said, ladies with really nice cars. And I said, why do they purchase? And he said, they all say the same thing, adorable. And he goes, Dad, but my cost of goods is killing me. You know, like the lemons, I'm like, and so this is totally cool because he's mapped out all of his cost of goods. He goes, I figure that if I lower my price, I'll sell more lemonade, and these ladies are tipping me 10 to 20 bucks anyway, so the lemonade cost is immaterial. And so he found if he put his cute brother next to him, stand up, Reed. Now, he was shorter then, that a couple little kids actually did better than one. He did a lot of testing around this. It was fairly sophisticated. So I cannot brag about my lemonade stand anymore. In college, I started a student newspaper. This is me up in the back. And I sold ads in a newspaper that didn't exist because we were going to create this newspaper, but none of us had any money. I had less than zero money. I'll tell you that in a second, but I, I went out and created a mock-up of the paper. We went to all these businesses in Provo, and I pre-sold ads in a newspaper that turned out BYU would not let us on campus because we were the rebel paper. So we used that to our benefit. We started painting these benches off campus. I don't know if we had permission or not. And then we were the rebel paper, so we went around campus and we distributed the papers as people came onto campus. That went on for about 10 years, and that's the founding crew of the Student Review. Right around that time, I was completely out of money. I had $50 left. My dad had a reversal in his business. Long story, a semi-truck on the 4th of July, a guy got drunk and was painting this truck, and he blew through my dad's business. Luckily, he wasn't there, but he completely destroyed my dad's company with a semi that just barreled through the company. They didn't have insurance in the place. And my dad said, "I love you, but I can't help you anymore." So it was right at this time, I had $50 left, and I either had to go get a job, or I had to, I had to leave school or go work. And up until this point, I actually hadn't ever worked for anybody else. I tried 3 times. I tried working for a cement contractor, and he went out of business. I tried doing summer sales on summer sales on insulation, and those people invested all the money that they're going to pay their sales reps, and they didn't have it liquid by the end of summer. In fact, I never got the money. And then I'm going to do water purification installation units. And it turned out 3 times in a row, I got stiffed by my employer, and I said, I can work for free by myself. I don't really need to go do that for somebody else. So those are my first 3 attempts at actually trying to have a job. And I don't know the odds of having 3 people stiff you in a row, but for many years I realized I needed to create my own business. So I have $50 left. I went to the guy that owned this building, and it was an old church that was turned into a restaurant called Seals Ivy Tower. And I said, "I want to rent this room up here. How much will you charge me an hour?" He said, $100. I said, "Great, I'll take 4 hours." And then I went to a band called The Boys, and I said, I want to have you guys play. How much you need? $240. Can I pay you at the end of the night? He said, "Sure." And then I went to this DJ. His name was Craig. Audio Visions was the name. $120 for the evening. Can I pay you at the end of the evening? So I took half my $25, and I went and bought flyers at BYU, and the other half, I bought a 6-foot sandwich, and I said, "Free food for the first 20 people." And then the party was Life's a Beach, and then I had 2... It gets worse. And it was To Heck with Winter Party, and I had HE double toothpicks crossed out, and I had the word heck there. And then on the flyer, it said, "Wear a bikini, getting free." And I was desperate, right? This is my last $50. I had to go home if this didn't work. How was I supposed to know that Maureen Stack and Rhonda were going to show up in bikinis? It's what I explained to Standards when they called me in. So, true story, I did get called into Standards over the party, but I cleared $2,200 at the end of the evening, and I did it. That was one party, and then I thought I'd throw another theme party. I did a pajama party, and then it got, like, I was running out of themes, so I just opened a dance club there, and we were killing it. I opened Friday, Saturday, then Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. And there's a place called the Star Palace who sent the fire marshal over saying these guys are clearly breaking code, you should shut them down. And I completely snuffed out the competition, which was the Star Palace, and I did it on $50. And now I got another $5 because I came to this entrepreneur lecture series. And there was a guy there who started Hewish Family Fun Centers. Any relationship here to the Hewish family? Anybody? Yeah?
I am their
All right. So back in California? No? Was it up here? Yeah, well, this guy was from Southern California, and so he came and spoke at a lecture series just like this, and he handed out envelopes to everybody in the lecture series that was sitting in a chair. That's why I recommend you sit in chairs. And it was $5 in every envelope. And I cannot tell you how much that $5 meant to me. That was like what I ate on. I was completely bust. Back in the day, you get Taco Bell tacos were like 19 cents or 24 cents. So I could eat for an entire week on $5. And that's literally my working capital to start my business so I could stay in school. And so I will always remember Mr. Hewish and Brother Hewish. And years later, I saw him up at Aspen Grove in his golden years. And I got to walk up and tell him the story of how much that $5 meant to me. He just started crying. It was fun. So he just said, entrepreneurship is fun, and I get to do stuff like this, and that's why, it's fun to be an entrepreneur. So this was great until it wasn't. The owner of the building was having financial problems, and he decided that he needed to be partners with me. He said, I don't want you taking all this risk. So we're going to go 50-50 partners. And I said, do I have a choice? He said, not really. And so then we split the cash. And then he came a couple of months later and said, you know what? You're making more than my cooks. And I said, uh-oh, where's this going? He said, we're going to change our split. I'm going to take 90%, and you're going to get 10%. And I said, I got a better idea. Why don't you take 100%, and I'll go do something else? So I went down the street, and it lasted for about a couple of months, because there's a lot to keep a club going. And, he didn't have what it took to keep it going. So he did. He got greedy. And, there we go. So I walked down the street. I found an abandoned restaurant upstairs downtown Provo on the corner of University and Center Street. And all this restaurant equipment was there. I negotiated with the owner of the building, and I went back to the bank, and I signed a loan for the equipment, and I started Backstage Cafe. And Backstage Cafe was the place to go. And by the way, I think some of you may be here because of Ivy Tower. A lot of people met their spouses, and they would probably be your parents. So you're welcome for that, too. This was the coolest hangout. Our strategy was make a place that nobody wanted to leave. And the waiter would walk up, and she'd be reading a book and say, can I get you a game? And we had all these games from dominoes to Monopoly. And I found out that college students were really cheap. You guys would get a glass of water and a game of Monopoly, and you'd sit at the table the entire night. So there was a 3-hour wait to get in because nobody would leave. And we did comedy there. We did dinner theater on the weekends. We did jazz. And it was a blast. I ended up selling that to a friend who went on to run it for a few years and eventually became Johnny B's Backstage, and then they moved it. So now, my wife met me while I was in school, actually just after school, and I had come back to BYU, and she said, no, I was in the PR program at BYU, and I don't remember seeing you there. I said, I was there. I was working a lot, not in class a lot. And she said, well, what years were you in school? And I didn't want to answer the question. And she said, were you there in the 80s? I said, yeah, I was in the 80s. She goes, well, what years were you there? And after the longest time, I said, she got it out of me, and I said, okay, I was there the whole decade. and it was true. I came back to school to take 2 classes, and I started the first recycling company in Provo. It was a 501c3. It was a nonprofit that hired people to recycle. And it was a blast. We had about 45 guys in our crew, and we recycled aluminum, wood pallets, paper, and the city donated trucks to us, and we created a nonprofit, and SPIN stood for Serving People in Need. So we had these homeless guys that we put on our crew, and the state paid their wages for 32.5 hours a week, and we had this out-of-control, crazy fun homeless recycling company. And one of the best times of my life, and so my wife said, okay, let me get this straight. You're almost 30. You haven't graduated from college. You don't have a job and you hang out with the homeless all day long. And I said, well, that doesn't sound like a dreamboat. I suppose your dreamboat has a job. She goes, yes, he does. So I went and got a job. And so I started, and that's a little bit later. So this one's a little out of order, but this was a question that changed my life. I went back to California. I started a water purification service company, and I was making about $125,000 a year. And the owner, I started the service arm of the organization, and the owner, I was 23, 24 years old at this time. This was earlier, and the owner said, "Okay, I own the building, I own the manufacturing. You're just the service arm. I don't think this is taking you where you're going." He said, "What?" I said, "You're basically digging ditches all day long." I said, "I don't know what you mean." He said, "You can spend 24 hours a day digging ditches, or you can build rocket ships. Wouldn't it be more fun to go to the moon?" And I said, "I don't know what you mean." He said, "Think big." He said, "This business is never going to take you where you want to go. You clearly have a lot of passion, a lot of ability, but definition of wealth is you're making money while you're sleeping. And you only make money while you're working here, and it's all dependent on you, and your scale is limited." So up until this point, nobody had given me permission to think big. And I literally took the keys to this business. I walked back. When I walked back home, I walked in, I gave the keys to my brother Marv. I said, "It's your business." I went back to school, took those last 2 classes, met Jenny, and ended up getting my first job. But this concept of thinking big was the first time anybody had given me permission. And I found that it's easier to raise money. So you're going to see a stark difference between days before that conversation and days after that conversation. You can do a lot more than you think you can do. My friends call me the late bloomer. When they saw me in the early days, they said, "Okay, that guy's never going to amount to anything." And when they make comments all the time like, "How did that happen?" And the difference was a couple of things. One was I started working on projects that had scale to them. It's easier to raise money. It's easier to attract talent. It's more fun, and it's the same amount of time during the day. Why waste your time on really small ideas? So here are my first tech experiences. I started a software company called Tom, Tax Office Manager. We raised some seed capital. It was a DOS scheduling package before Windows. It worked great until we had a version of the software that came out that had a data corruption bug. And in one day, I went from having thousands of customers to having to shut it down because of a data corruption error that we didn't catch in testing. So we'll call that a fail. Sometimes learning is the best failure. I decided I didn't know what the heck I was doing, so I went and I worked at another company called Folio. This was the first text retrieval engine. We put the scriptures on computer for the first time. I was the product manager that brought it to Windows. The internet hit while we were doing this. We put everything online on the internet. And it was an absolutely world-changing experience for me. 4.5 years, then I took some technology out of Folio. I spun it out. I raised $5.4 million of venture financing in '97, and I created Knowlix. I went from clueless over on the left to fairly sophisticated on the right. I did not know what venture capital was here, and I learned about venture capital for the first time here. I had no idea what this was, but I knew when I heard it, I felt like I was called to this and to help leverage my skills and help other entrepreneurs. And so I sold this company. I put $5,000 into it, and we sold it in 19 months for $45 million. And when I started it, I had 6 months of runway. I quit my job. If it didn't work, I did not have a backup plan. I had burned the boats. My son Paul here was 1 year old. I had a mortgage, a house, wife, and I had no right taking that risk, but I did, and it had to work. And part of that having to work was the motivation. There was no wasted time in those 19 months. After I sold that business, I realized that there was another big problem in Utah. When I raised my company, when I did my company, there was no capital under management in Utah. See this line right here? That's how much capital was under management. That's $14 million. There was $14 million of total capital under management in the state of Utah. So I had to get lead investors from outside the state. There was effectively nothing going on during this massive drought of capital. And so as an entrepreneur, I turned my energy to solving this capital gap. And so this is the funding continuum. When you have an idea, you're in, this is two guys in a garage with their idea, sweat equity. And then if you validate it and you want to move forward to the next step, it's angel financing, so friends, family, fools, 50 to 500,000. And as you grow, you need less mentoring, your risk decreases, and your business valuation goes up till you get to venture rounds, 500,000 to 5 million, growth equity, 5 to 20, public markets and private equity, 20 million plus. And that was back in the day. Now people are getting seed rounds at 20 million, so it's kind of weird, but you'll come back to this. And so I wanted to go and take this and solve this risk, and so I realized I had to think a little bigger. And how could I leverage my experience as an entrepreneur to go solve this capital gap for all the other entrepreneurs in Utah? So this methodology of nail it and scale it, I developed when I was at Folio. I created PowerPoint presentations and materials. I used it for my startup, and then I applied the same methodology to helping create the capital markets and the venture industry in Utah. I did hundreds of meetings with anybody that would listen to me to talk about the capital gap that existed in Utah. And I created a presentation, and I gave that presentation from the governor to the janitor throughout the entire state, and I created a common vision in the state of what we could do as a state. What if we had capital? What could we do together? And these are some of the meetings I had from government, industry, angel investors, financial institutions, research universities, and I created a map of all the people, and after I came out of the meeting, I would say, who else should I be talking to? And they'd introduce me to somebody else, and I did that meeting, and who else should I be talking to? And after a while, the meetings started circling in on themselves, and I found the top people in Utah that had clout, that cared about this issue. A student group worked with me, a Harvard student group. The governor asked me to work with him. We brought the Kauffman Foundation in, so we triangulated. This is what the student group at Harvard came up with. They had 13 recommendations. We took those recommendations. I had them pinned in front of my desk for the longest time, and we ended up implementing 9 of the 13 recommendations that the Harvard group came up with. So here's the model. You basically, to have a venture ecosystem work, you have to have a critical mass of sophisticated entrepreneurs. You have to have innovators, engineers, and intellectual property, and you need capital in a high-trust environment. So this was the end state. This was the goal. We wanted to create this ecosystem where entrepreneurs could thrive. And I'm really proud of what we've been able to do in Utah. We've been able to, so our funds, we've been able to raise now over $1 billion. So a long ways from the $50 to be able to stay in school or not. We've invested in over 150 companies, and I've created 9 different funds. My most recent fund I haven't announced publicly yet is the Harmon Brothers Nail It and Scale It Fund. I'm creating Utah's first consumer fund. And so I've partnered with the Harmon Brothers. Those are the guys that did Squatty Potty, Purple, Poopery, Chapbooks, Lume, and they have a home run to at-bat ratio of 41%. So that means 41% of the deals they launch are 10x or greater. 60% are 8x or greater in the first 12 months. So these guys have cracked the code on how to launch consumer products. So we're putting a fund with that, and we're going to create the Utah's first consumer fund. Nobody knows this, but I also came up with the idea and created the Utah Fund of Funds. And I've done others that I don't talk about. They weren't as successful. So a few lessons learned. Of the 150 companies, I started watching patterns of the companies that failed. And it's interesting. Levanta raised $65 million, $35 million, $20 million, $15 million, $35 million, $40 million on Exogen. And these were companies that were raising a large amount of capital. And Levanta had Kleiner Perkins in it, so sophisticated entrepreneurs. Matt Mossman, one of the brightest guys I know, sophisticated entrepreneurs, plenty of capital, hit the wall and couldn't get their product working. And I had studied this previously, and I watched that there was a pattern of failure, but it had nothing to do with the amount of capital these companies had raised. Now, we've sold a few companies too, and we've taken a few companies public, and I'm sure these other ones have exited. Something's happened since then. There's a few that are still walking dead. But the problem identified is that 70% of startups failed due to premature scaling. Basically, they had too much capital. They didn't have to go solve the customer or the market problem. They solved their own problem and wandered in that desert, focused internally for too long, which drove me to write the book, Nail It and Scale It. I took the experiences of the guys that had a habit of getting it right over and over and over again, and I documented that. And they basically, and you guys read the book, I'm sorry, brought the customer up to the beginning and have a conversation. And you can take out deal killer risk very early in the process before you've spent any money. In fact, it's the best time to do it. And I believe the best time to do a startup is while you're in college. You have no costs, so what if you fail? And a guy gave me some advice. He said, if you want to be rich, don't buy a car after college. And I said, why not? Because you're going to think you've earned it, you think you want that nice car, hold off, drive your beater, keep going, and keep your expenses low, he was saying. So you can keep taking those swings for the fences over and over again and work for equity. As opposed to, I've got to get a job and you crank up your lifestyle. And if you do that, you're going to be working for wages for the rest of your life. But if you take these risks earlier in your career while you still can, that's the time to do it. My recommendation is to do what I did. Go work for somebody else. I worked for Folio for 4.5 years. Get a degree at university, and then get your street degree. Go work for somebody and learn. Take any job in a high-growth company. I told this to my little brother, David. He was getting married, didn't have but a semester college under his belt. And I said, come on, work for one of our companies. He got in at $7 an hour. And within 24 months, he was making $100,000 a year. He had moved up through the ranks in that company. Then he moved to another company. Then I pulled him into one of my companies that we ended up launching and selling. And he taught himself everything he needed to know. As an engineer, I don't care if you have a degree or not. We're looking for engineers that can code. The other folks probably should stay in school. All right, so market entry strategies. So here's just a brief recap, and we won't spend too much time on this. But this is stuff that's not in the book. But there's ways to enter the market that are more effective than others. Greenfield is a legitimate way. Here's a new category. So go create a new category where one doesn't exist before. So there's a lot of social networking companies, and Facebook emerged as the leader in this category and created dominance. Back in the day, Honeywell created the home thermostat market, and they owned it. And until Nest came along and had a 10x better product and shifted the customers away to them. And so this is tough. iPhone did this, Tesla did this, where you have a 10x better product and you're shifting them away. It's a very expensive strategy, not something you can do in college very easily. The most effective way to enter the marketplace is disruption. And disruption is basically coming from the low end of the marketplace, an unloved, underserved customer. So when everybody got on Facebook, parents and kids and college kids, a lot of people got off, and this little startup called Instagram created a unique space for people that didn't like what was happening on Facebook. And first people laughed at it because you look down from Facebook and you say, "Oh, it's just pictures. We can do that on Facebook." And but they didn't get that they didn't get the essence of the product. And Facebook paid $2 billion for that company. Sorry, it's $1 billion for the company. And we thought that was a lot of money back in the day. And then another little startup came along called Snapchat. And we thought that was extra stupid. 8 seconds of disappearing text, who would ever do that? And we found there was a trend here. When you're disrupting, people on this curve will look down and go, that is a dumb idea. I'll give you some visibility to what that looks like in a second. And so Facebook tried to buy them for $3 billion, and they didn't, and they went public. So disruption is really it's within your reach. you can create a disruptive company. You can go after the unloved, underserved market. Now, how do you do that? So Scott asked me to make this approachable. Basically, take it from your seat to my seat. And so I'm walking you through the journey from your seat to my seat. And how do I create this disruptive startup? Well, you can start by practicing looking stupid. Mr. Beans nailed it. And why is looking stupid a superpower? Anybody know that? Anybody want to shout out an answer to that? It's one of my superpowers. I don't mind looking stupid.
Because then you're not afraid to fail.
You're not afraid to fail. Exactly. You don't have, you're not, pride and ego and self-image is the enemy of a startup because you're going to spend a lot of days looking stupid. So let's look at some of these early breakout ideas and look at what they looked like on day one. I got this great idea. Let's let people rent our couches, total strangers. The first time I heard, this is the picture that I had in my mind of what a ridiculous idea this was, to rent out my couch to a complete stranger. I'm well served. I stay in hotels. Everybody I know stays in hotels. We don't do couch surfing. Ridiculous idea. Worse idea. When Jenny and I were getting married and she put all those ideas on the cork board, she goes, wouldn't it be fun to share all these ideas with our friends? And I think it's a ridiculous, who would want to do that, right? And so these ideas feel stupid the first time you expose them to a well-served market. But you have to remember, there's an unserved, unloved market down here that is thinking this is brilliant. I still don't know those people, by the way, but I'm sure they're out there. All right, so I want to give you a visceral feeling of what it feels like to be that disruptor. I had to stop it before the guys in bikini started sprinting. It was coming up. It wasn't pretty. You feel like a moron for the longest time. You feel like a loser. You feel like you're a fraud. You feel like you've defrauded people because is this really going to happen? Is this really an idea? Was I just making this up? And then it happens, and you have the breakthrough, and then it's just like you're surfing. And obviously that couch surfing business was Airbnb, and that corkboard business was Pinterest, which you may not know. Pinterest is the fastest growing social network, ahead of Tumblr, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook is all the way over on the right with a serious decline in growth. So your job as an entrepreneur is to innovate. That customer's job is to validate, and it's a nice partnership. So I've had a fun career supporting a lot of amazing entrepreneurs. These are some of the companies that we've led and supported, and I've done hundreds more. So here's my advice to you. Once you have a great idea, stop. Just stop right there, because you have to ask yourself, where is this idea going to take me? And I never bothered asking the question about what's the end of the road of this idea. I would just jump on it and just start running down that path, regardless of whether it was a good idea or a bad idea. And so here's a few questions that I found helpful that I ask myself. What is the problem that I'm solving? I recommend you fall in love with the problem. Don't fall in love with the product. As soon as you build something or fall in love with the product, you're dead. Fall in love with the problem. How is this opportunity aligned with your life mission? Is this something you're supposed to do? You have many ways of understanding that. You can look to your patriarchal blessing. You can take your decisions to Heavenly Father in prayer. You can basically ask for people around you and get feedback in terms of what you think you're supposed to be doing with your life, and is this aligned with your mission? And don't get dragged off into the weeds if it's not something you're supposed to be doing. Not everybody should be an entrepreneur. Why now? Why is the time now to do this versus why didn't it happen already? Because it's one of the first questions an investor is going to ask you. Why now? What's unique about this? What convergence of factors or technology have come together now that make this possible that were not possible previously? And then ask yourself, do you want to spend the next 3 to 5 or 20 years working on this? And had I asked myself those questions, I would not have done a restaurant. I would not have done a dance club. I might have done the dance club. It was great to meet girls. I would not have done several of the businesses that I had I asked myself that bottom question. Here's some tools that might be helpful to you. I apologize you have to read Nail It and Scale It. If you want your money back, come up afterwards. I'll give you your money back. But I wrote this as a step-by-step manual. Up until this point, nobody had written a book that was prescriptive, that was a process. It was a bunch of theories about how entrepreneurship worked, but we had this bold idea, like, I can actually walk you through the process. I've done it myself, and this is how it works. It was written for a business-to-business play, but it also can work for consumers also. I should follow up with another book. We've learned a lot since we've published this, and it's been, I don't know, at least 10 years. It's been 10 years now. It came out before Lean Startup. I was doing this 10 years before Lean Startup, and there's a lot we've learned since then. I've built a big idea canvas. Some of you have used it. This is a hypothesis generator. So once you have an idea you think you should be working on, you fill out the questions here, and the second page walks you through. You take the first page and you plug in the answers into this, and it kicks out a hypothesis statement. That is something that you go out and test. And it's super fun because you get to have somebody beat up your idea, and you don't have to, it helps you walk around your idea and beat it up without having to hear feedback from anybody else. It basically answers some key questions. All right, so where's my career now, and what am I doing next? This is our family mission. On the fridge in our house, we have a piece of paper. My wife and I wrote this mission, and basically it said, where much is given, much is required. The Ahlstrom family mission is to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, liberate the captive, minister to the sick and afflicted. In Jacob, it says, if you have resources, if you have a hope in Christ, and you want money and your resources, by the way, why? I don't know, because it's a lot more hassle to have that than not have it. But if you do it for this purpose. And the scriptures are pretty clear about it. This is what you should be doing with your extra resources. So we have used entrepreneurship as a tool to help us achieve this family mission. What I'm doing at this stage of my career right now is I'm building companies that help feed the hungry, liberate the captive, and ministers to the relief to the sick and afflicted at scale. And I'll take you through a case study of one of them. I'll just tell you briefly about these. Credit Listo, this is a credit bureau for emerging markets. So the company that bought our company, Folio, was a company called Reed Elsevier, and they had a division called LexisNexis. So actually, LexisNexis bought us, and then Reed Elsevier bought them. And one of the challenges in emerging markets is 90% of the people, 91% of the people in Latin America don't have access to credit. That means the people in Mexico buy their homes a brick at a time. There's no liquidity. There's no easy resale of houses. And so a lot of our wealth in our nation is tied to our homes. Without credit, that wealth is locked up. What if they had a credit bureau that they could use? So there's a missing middle. The 50% of the market do not have access to credit. And that missing middle, we're going to provide credit through Credit Listo. We've partnership with LexisNexis, and we're going to provide the first digital credit bureau in Latin America. If it works, it will double the GDP in Latin America, to possibly triple it. It will end poverty if it works. It will open up capital for basic opportunities for people to get cars and homes, and capital will flow. So it'll be a game changer. I'm very excited about that. If I do nothing else in my career but that, I'll be happy. Sanami is a company we just launched. We are at TechCrunch Battlefield. We were on stage 2 weeks ago. One of several thousand companies, out of several thousand companies, our company was chosen. It's the top pitch event in the world. I had dinner with Sequoia. It was really weird. I'm pitching Sequoia on my startup, and it was fun. And it allows immigrant workers to participate in the financial system in the United States and send money back home. Alta Dev is a coding school we just started with Rob McMillan, one of my business partners. And you can look it up online, Paul Ahlstrom, Jamaica, and you'll see a bunch of stories about this. We committed to train 1,000 engineers in 2020 in Jamaica. And so we're creating a coding school, and we use the Lambda model where we're not charging them to enter the school. We only get paid once they get jobs. So we're partnering with all of the companies in the Caribbean to hire our employees as they come out of the school. Liberate the captive. This is a technology that we spun out of the University of Utah, and it's called iDetect. Has anybody ever heard of this technology before? Over here, you guys interned there, great. It tells whether you're telling the truth or not. And it was invented by the guys that invented the digital polygraph. And they felt bad for inventing the polygraph because it's not that accurate. So this actually looks at your eyes, and it turns out your eyes tell whether you're telling the truth or not. When we lie, we generate cognitive load. And that is demonstrated through physiological means, and part of it is our pupils dilate 3 millimeters, and we can't stop it for 3 seconds. So we have a camera that locks onto your eyes. It's an infrared camera. It measures your pupils 60 times per second. And we ask you your name. Is your name John? Did you steal the $20? And we look at the baseline and how you answer the question. And we can tell with over 90% accuracy whether you're telling the truth. This is now being used by many countries around the world. The country of Peru, Mexico, Colombia use it for the military, for their air force, for their police, for hiring so that the cartels don't get in. All the government agencies in Canada use it. We're now in 32 countries. And what I'm most excited about, it's being used back home now. Many people are falsely accused of crimes. And the attorney generals in the United States are now using this to verify if the person did or did not do the crime, and whether they're going to prosecute or not prosecute. The couple's going through a nasty divorce up in Kaysville. It just happened. The wife accused the husband of abusing the children. He said he didn't do it. He took a test, and turns out he didn't do it. His life would have been hell for the next 100 years. Never would have recovered, but for Converis. And so we're literally liberating the captive. The next one, the one I'm actually most excited about because it hits home, it's a platform called HelpTree. 10 years ago, my wife was diagnosed with a terminal cancer called multiple myeloma. These are my boys. Look how chubby Clark is. He looks so cute. He's right here. All right. We have this picture at the house. He's got this big chubby cheeks, and every time he comes over, he takes it off and turns it around. All right. So this was a strange season in our life. Payback. Yeah. This was a strange season in our life. So we lived in Mexico, but Neil, who's right here, he's 12 now, he was 2 years old at the time. And how do I tell a 2-year-old that you can't go knock on your mom's door for 9 months because she's getting back-to-back bone marrow transplants and couldn't be around the family? And so Janie came back to the States. We stayed in Mexico, and we figured it out. Once she got back on her feet, we created the Crowd Care Foundation. And we created the largest patient community for myeloma patients in the world. And we created these various programs to fill in the niches that weren't being done to accelerate a cure for this multiple myeloma. One of the platforms we created was called HealthTree. And the idea with HealthTree is when you get sick, you have to reinvent the wheel. We've been through this before with my brother David. 6 years prior, he died of leukemia, and we had just gone through that experience. And so our hypothesis was, can we deliver excellence of care to all myeloma patients and eventually all cancer patients and accelerate a cure by aggregating patient data and building a patient network? So LinkedIn for cancer. Hadn't been done before. It's a simple idea, and we found out why. So we ran the nail it and scale it process. We basically came the entire summer, and we took our screen. This basically, here we go. Well, that means I am coming out of time. Now, is this out of time or question and answer time?
Yeah, we're
out of time. Okay, so we'll be quick here. We took our hypothesis on the road. We did 50-city tour, 2018. We did 50 cities, and I slept on my bed 3 days. We visited with 850 patients across the United States to basically identify, could we get the early adopters on board? We created a product. We captured feedback. We iterated every single day. And at the end of the summer, we launched a video that generated 3.6 million views. The Today Show called. We ended up on the Today Show. And now it's been sponsored by all the major pharma companies. And we have done something that's never been done before. And because Jenny had cancer, hundreds of thousands of people now are benefiting by this platform of crowd care. And then we have thousands of people now inside of the system. So before you guys take off, I want to ask you a question. You guys, many of you will be successful. Before you have that day, you need to decide which path you're going to take. There's a path of service and a path of consumption. And if you show up with a bunch of money, you're naturally going to be running down this path of consumption. And you need to decide beforehand if you're going to do that path of service. Because once you have the money, it's really difficult. You want to buy the nice house and the big car and give all that to yourself, and you don't want to go do that. And so you need to make that commitment in advance. And I promise you, if you do, and your heart is right, Heavenly Father can accelerate your path down that path faster than anything else. Many of you didn't, how many people here, by the raise of hands, plan to leave the church? How many people plan to divorce their wife? No? Nobody? How many plan to have their kids never talk to them again? How many plan to get arrested? Nobody? Of course not. But I have put multiple entrepreneurs in jail for fraud. I have seen multiple people I've invested into leave the church, leave their wives, their kids won't talk to them because they did not get their priorities straight on day one. And when they had the money, they tipped over. Please do not tip over. Okay, boys. So for those of you that stuck it out, I have a gift for you. So back in the day, Brother Hewish handed out $5 to everybody in the room. And some people laughed at it. Some people thought it was hokey. That $5 meant everything to me. So for an inflation-adjusted amount, it's actually $10 today.